All right, good evening and welcome to another edition of the I Am Abel Foundation's Medicine Makers, where if your destination is a career in medicine, we're going to show you how to get there. I am your host for the evening, Dr. Rene Roberts, board certified family medicine physician and mentor with the I Am Abel Foundation. We are going to continue our series this evening entitled Black Men in Medicine. And we have a very distinguished and special guest with us this evening, Dr. Derek Robinson. Welcome, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you very much.
Okay, but before we dive into our conversation, obviously we'd like to do a little bit of station identification. Remember, you can find us live right now on CAN TV here in Chicago, channel 21, or you can stream us live online by going to www.cantv.org and click on channel 21. Also, for those of you that may not know, this is a call-in show, so if you have a question for myself or for our distinguished guest, Dr. Robinson, you can give us a call at 312-738-1060, and the number is also on your screen. Before we get started with Dr. Robinson, just a little bit about us. The I Am Abel Foundation is a Chicago area nonprofit organization devoted to raising our next generation of healthcare heroes. So if you are a high school student, college student, or post-baccalaureate student interested in pursuing a career in medicine, please check out the I Am Abel Foundation by going to our website, which is www.iamable, and Abel is spelled ABEL.org, www.iamable.org for more information about how you can become a part of this exciting organization. Okay, well, let's get started. For our topic for the evening, again, we are continuing our series on Black men in medicine. Many of you may not know Blacks make up 13% of the U.S. population, but when it comes to Black men, that are in medicine, less than 3% of medical doctors in this country are actually identified as Black men or African American men. And so the I Am Abel Foundation is working very hard to find solutions to increase the numbers of Black men in medicine. And one way we are doing that is through conversation to highlight this need and bringing in doctors from our community. So that brings me to tonight's guest, Dr. Derek Robinson, Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. Welcome to Medicine Makers, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Yeah, you have an impressive list of accolades. If I had to list all of the accomplishments that this man has done, it'll take up the entire show. But why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'll be very brief, and let me start by saying it takes a village, and so I'm really happy to be here at CAN TV and to be with the I Am Abel Foundation. Again, my name is Derek Robinson. I'm a practicing emergency medicine physician, board certified in emergency medicine. I reside here in Chicago. I have two sons who are Chicago public school students, a wife who is a physician as well, and just really happy to be here and be part of the conversation that we're having with the community about careers in healthcare professions and specifically around opportunities for increasing the number of Black men in medicine.
Fantastic. Why don't we start out? Can you share with our audience a little bit about your journey to medicine?
Sure. So I'm a native of Louisiana. I grew up with the dream of becoming a physician, but wasn't quite sure that I would be successful in that journey. In fact, I didn't really see an individual that looked like me that was a physician until I was actually in college. But had some good folks, actually parents of individuals who were on my swim team that were physicians, so I had a chance to get to know them a bit and became more confident that this was a career that I could pursue. And through my collegiate experience at Xavier University and later at Howard University College of Medicine, was able to really be successful in achieving that dream. And that certainly brought me to Chicago for residency in emergency medicine, and I think the rest is history.
Yes, and history you have made. Okay, so let's ask you this. Why do you think that representation matters in medicine, and what are some of the areas where experience for patients in Illinois are affected by underrepresentation?
Great question. So let me start by saying that during the pandemic, I think we've all recognized the importance of having trusted messengers. As we've looked at some of the many challenges we've had, we've looked to them for guidance and hope. And physicians and the physician workforce are composed of people. They're from our communities, our culture, And so they're not immune to some of the challenges that we've seen in society. So we have sexism and heterosexism and racism and some of those other issues that we're not immune to as physicians. And when you look at the history of Western medicine, it hasn't typically been inclusive, right? I mean, there were many, many years before we began to see more women in medicine. So even as we think about terms that you and I are familiar with, like hysterectomy, the removal of the uterus, there's no removal of hysteria. That has to do with that it was predominantly a male-composed workforce for many years. But it's also had a long history of excluding individuals that are underrepresented, so Native Americans, Latinos, and African Americans. And we had things like the Flexner Report that closed many black medical schools, exclusion from medical societies, which you had to have membership in a medical society to get staff privileges at hospitals, and a long history where hospitals were racially segregated. So within the structure of healthcare, healthcare was actually inferior for African Americans and minorities, and that was sort of codified in the process of how care was delivered. So now when you walk the halls of hospitals, you still look at physicians as they walk the halls, and you often don't see a physician workforce that's reflective of the community that's being served. And that really comes to bear during the pandemic, where you have folks who have some historic distrust about vaccines and different types of treatment, because there's a real history in our country of mistreatment within the healthcare system. And so when we talk about the numbers, you mentioned some of those earlier. When we look at the physician population in Illinois, 39% of physicians are women, even though women make up 50% of the adult population in Illinois. African Americans make up about 5.8% of the physician workforce, although they're 14.7% of the Illinois population. And in Latinos, they're 4.5% of the medical workforce, but only 18%. And 18% of the population. So that's significant underrepresentation when you compare their representation in the physician workforce versus the community. And when we get into specialties, which you and I are familiar with, like orthopedics or urology or radiology, that disparity is even more glaring. And finally, I'll close it by just saying, when we look at African American men, in 1978, 3.1% of medical students were African American men. In 2019, 2.9% of medical students are African Americans. That's a huge underrepresentation. So that's how we bring this underrepresentation issue home.
Excellent point. And you brought up a very pressing issue, which was the pandemic. And I wanted to know if you could go a little bit further and shed some light on the racial disparities that we saw during the pandemic.
Sure. So I'd like to start by saying that the disparities that we have seen during the pandemic are not related to genetics. We've long had what you and I would describe as endemic disparities in chronic conditions, particularly in the African American community: hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, kidney disease, maternal health, maternal and infant morbidity and mortality. These disparities set the stage for the disproportionate medical risk that was increased when the pandemic came along. And then when you couple that with many of the social determinants of health, it really just set the stage for a very disparate experience for minority populations. These are individuals who were less likely to be able to work from home, so they're the last ones to come off the front lines, high levels of exposure to the virus. And then when we had vaccines available, distrustful of vaccines and really wanted to see, well, how does it work for everybody else before we take it? Meanwhile, they still have that exposure. And even when we look at healthcare workers, we know that there were healthcare workers of color died at a much higher rate than none healthcare workers who were not of color. And when we look at the vaccination rates for COVID-19 in Illinois, 91% vaccination rate for COVID in the Asian community, 70% in the white community, 68% in the Hispanic community, and 63% in the black community. So again, we have to stitch together these issues around trust and representation, health literacy, and the like. And the sad part is too many people have lost their lives during the pandemic, especially the latter part when we've had vaccines available because of distrust, and that's devastating for families.
Excellent points. This brings me to my next question, which kind of piggybacks off of what you just talked about. Can you explain the case the business case for increasing physician diversity?
Yeah. There are a lot of cases for increasing it, right? And we talk about black men in medicine. I'll just also reflect, we look at black men in the community. We had one of the largest drops in life expectancy of all Americans, only preceded by the drop in life expectancy for American Indians, which was 6 years. For black men, we were the second there. Health disparities are expensive. Health inequities are expensive, not just in terms of dollars for employers, for local governments, for state governments and federal governments, but they are costly to families who have lost years of life that they can spend with their family members. It robs individuals of years of productivity in the workforce, so that impacts our GDP. A lot of conversations around the economy recently. And so when we think about increasing diversity, I think there's a synergistic effect. One, having more diverse physicians helps improve the education of all doctors, right? Because doctors get to know individuals from different cultures, different religions, much better, and improves their relationship with patients at the bedside, their cultural sensitivity and competency and humility. I think it also brings to light an opportunity for individuals to identify some of the defects that we have in our healthcare delivery system, because many times these are the physicians who are going to say, hey, you know what, we're not doing research in some of the medical conditions that we need to, or we're seeing some differences in how care is being delivered. How do we change the processes in healthcare to ensure that every individual receiving care has the opportunity to get the highest quality care and have great healthcare outcomes? And then there's a body of research that has shown that individuals who are from communities of color actually have a higher level of trust and a higher level of compliance or agreement with their doctors in terms of their treatment plans when they're able to receive care from individuals that look like them and share their experiences. And so we want to be able to meet patients where they are, and whether if that's a woman patient who wants a woman physician, then she should be able to have access to a woman physician. There may be things that she might not want to share with a man physician that she might want to share with a woman physician. So likewise, we have those circumstances around being able to kind of correlate some of the needs and interests of patients.
Excellent. I know I've come into that situation, you probably have too, practicing medicine, where we have patients that you walk into the room and my gosh, they breathe a sigh of relief. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're a black woman and you're my doctor. Maybe the same has happened for you as well. Well, before we can increase the physician workforce, increase diversity in the physician workforce, we have to get into medical school. And that is the challenge. Becoming a physician is a long journey.
It is.
A lot of people don't know, many of you do, but a lot of you may not understand that the journey to becoming a physician can expand a decade, if not longer. After high school, 4 years of college. So you've got to get into college, do well in college, then apply to medical school. Then we have residency training. I did family medicine. You did emergency medicine. Yes. Okay, so that's at least a good 3 to 4 years of additional training after you've completed medical school. So no, we certainly couldn't have this conversation without asking this question. What are some of the structural or systemic challenges seen along this journey that can affect the number of black men or even just underrepresented minorities in general in the applicant pool? Yeah,
Dr. Roberts, you're right. It is a long journey, and there are a number of systemic things along that journey that we can address to help improve diversity. Let me start by saying that there are many individuals that argue that we do have a sufficient pool of diverse physicians who are ready to enter the profession, who are knocking at the door and are unable to get in. And Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, who's a CEO and Dean down at the Morehouse School of Medicine, was part of a report that was published, I think, within the last 2 years that spoke specifically to that issue. I will say that in the last 2 years, some of the most current data shows that there has been some increase in the number of African American first-year medical students, and so that's good, but definitely not sufficient to meet the long trend of underrepresentation that we have. So what are some of the structural issues? One is we have underfunding of schools in many of our underrepresented in medicine communities. On average, minority school districts receive $2,200 less per student than white school districts. So you begin to see an unequal access in advanced placement courses within the curriculum, underrepresentation and gifted and talented programs. So these are things we know are important to, really accelerating and exciting that educational journey for folks when they're young. And so of course, we see disparities in disciplinary action in the schools. The second thing is we see differences in household income inequality. That has a huge impact on whether young people believe that they can go to college, right? When they look at the price tag, is that within a realm of possibility for them?
Yes.
Our parents
some of us are still paying for our
some of us are still paying for loans.
Education, yes.
Absolutely.
Because there's a large price tag involved with that. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's no problem. I mean, it's huge, and it impacts them, from high school to college, and then we have applying to medical school from college, right? So do you have the money for, preparation for the MCAT course? Do you have money to apply to the different schools you need to apply to? And then the price tag gets even bigger, right? And so, we understand that, in professional schools, you can typically get loans to cover your expenses and tuition. But for individuals who come from families where they don't have individuals who are, who've gone down that journey before, it is a barrier, right? So these things sort of add up. And then when we look at higher education, we've also seen some disinvestment in terms of the amount of dollars available to support both public and private institutions. And so we have seen some drop in the number of minority students who are participating at the collegiate level. And many of our institutions, both private and public in Illinois, don't represent the diversity of the community across the state. So you already have the underrepresentation that exists in the collegiate level. So these things just kind of pile on top of each other. So these are some of the structural things that we have to address to help us yield the type of results that we want to see down the road.
Excellent. Yes, it is a journey. It is a long distance race, is what I would like to call it. Definitely not a sprint. Just as a reminder, you are watching Medicine Makers here on Chicago's CAN TV, Channel 21. You can find us online, streaming live right now at www.cantv.org and click on Channel 21 to watch us live. And we are speaking with the very distinguished Dr. Derek Robinson, Vice President and Chief Medical Officer of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, continuing our conversation this evening on Black men and medicine. Okay, well, let's keep going here. What are some things that we can do now that can make a difference in the short term in terms of recruiting and retaining diverse healthcare professionals?
Well, I think we have to start by having a conversation. And certainly that's one of the things that we've done at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois. We started our Institute for Physician Diversity, which really serves as a nice channel for us to have conversations with academic medical centers, medical schools, teaching hospitals about this particular topic, making investments in that partnership, helping exchange information around best practices, and then having a level of transparency and accountability and putting that sort of within the business framework of those relationships. And right now we have the privilege of working with at least 11 teaching hospitals and academic medical centers in the state. We've also formed some really unique partnerships with the ACGME, or the Accreditation Council on Graduate Medical Education, which is based here in Chicago but accredits all residency programs across the country, as well as the AAMC, which accredits medical schools. And so we have some unique relationships with them. So bringing these things together, I think, has allowed us to be in sort of a catalyzing role, but it's something that we have to all do together, and so we're really grateful for the leadership and partnership of those institutions, as well as the incredible work that's taken place at the Am Abel Foundation that's really blazing a trail forward, really creating opportunities for young people across the Chicago area who are interested in careers in medicine.
Excellent. Well, I always want to share with our audience, since we're having such a fantastic and candid conversation, did you actually face any challenges along the way on your journey to become a physician?
Yeah, I mean, the challenges, I think, were significant. I'll tell you, one was the fear of failure, right? When you fight so hard to get there, to get to medical school, and then you know that you're carrying kind of the hopes and dreams of your family, your community, yes, friends. If you're like one of very few, like everybody that knows you are like, hey, he's going to become a doctor, right? And medical school and that journey is filled with a lot of challenges, right? You build your stamina up along the way. But I would say the fear of having to go home and say, hey, I couldn't make it, was a big challenge. And sometimes it's a challenge that keeps folks from actually attempting to go down that path. And so I would certainly encourage young people who have a dream of becoming a physician or entering another profession to definitely pursue that dream. Don't be discouraged by the fear of failure. We've had some conversations. I've heard you share your story. These challenges set us up for some much more substantial challenges that we'll see down the road. And so if you think of some of the difficult conversations that we may have as physicians with patients, understanding what it feels like to receive bad news and how to work through those challenges and pull on your network to help you have the strength that's necessary to pull through an unexpected illness. It takes a certain type of person to help lead an individual through that. That's part of the responsibility that we have as physicians. It's not just the medicines that we provide or surgeries that are performed, right? But it's really the human connection and bringing folks forward. So sometimes the challenges that we face on our career journey is preparing us to be more effective in the work that we have ahead.
Excellent. Well, I have a question because many of you may not know it's one thing to be a physician, but it's another thing to be a chief medical officer. That's pretty spectacular, which just highlights your success with actually finding leadership roles in medicine. Can you share with our audience a little bit about how you got involved at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois?
Sure. Well, history is very interesting. I had spent some time visiting Blue Cross in my prior role where I worked with the Illinois Hospital Association. We actually partnered on some projects to help improve readmissions in the state of Illinois. Never imagining that I would actually come and work for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois, but received a call regarding an opportunity and said, hey, this is something that you should take a look at. And certainly Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Illinois has a long presence in the state, having been in business for more than 80 years, and we have more than 17 million individuals that we serve both in Illinois and across the country. And so for me, it's been really exciting to be a part of that organization and really lead teams that help improve the health of not only our members, but different communities that we do business in. So it's been a real honor, real privilege to serve in that role. Had a chance to come and spend some time with Dr. Roberts at KNTB.
We're excited to have you here. Did you have any mentors?
I have more mentors than I have time to list in today's conversation. I think mentors have been extremely important to me, and that's one of the reasons why I'm a big proponent of mentors, because I think that for me, the mentors I had continued to give me different lenses through which I could see the future. I could see further and broader than what I had dreamed and what I had imagined would be possible. And I found that mentors have been instrumental in not only telling you things that you should do, but also telling you things that you shouldn't do. And I found that mentors are willing to share mistakes that they've made along the way. So getting these insights I found is just as easy as asking. So I would certainly encourage individuals not to feel that the folks that they see, that they admire, that they aspire to be like are beyond their reach. Be willing to reach out, make that connection, form those relationships, and maintain those relationships over time. I think mentoring is very important. And you all do a lot of that at the Am Abel Foundation, which I think is extraordinary.
Could not agree with you more, and that is what the I Am Abel Foundation is all about. So maybe if you're listening or know someone out there that is in high school, college, or has already completed college but interested in pursuing a career in medicine, the I Am Abel Foundation is for you. You can check us out at www.iamabel.org, and again, Abel is spelled A-B-E-L. Okay, well, before we approach the end of our show, I'd like to ask you this as well. So you're a physician. You also happen to be a black man who is a physician. Is there anything extra, anything that you haven't told us yet that you could share with our audience about your personal journey, or any advice that you would offer a young black man that is interested in becoming a doctor?
So I think the advice I'll offer is definitely a career worth pursuing. You outlined the number of years it takes. That can be really daunting to someone at the beginning of their professional journey. So I think it's definitely worth pursuing. Academic preparation is important, and a commitment to excellence. Mentoring, we just talked about, I think is key. Partly because you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And on a complicated, long journey like this, you want to try to streamline things and make as few mistakes as possible. I think certainly your pursuit should be driven by a commitment to improve the health of other individuals. And certainly dedication and persistence is going to be important, as it is in many other pursuits, whether it's medicine, business, being an entrepreneur. You've got to have some grit, and so definitely bring that to the table with you. And we need you. So we're here to encourage you, and we look forward to you all joining us.
Absolutely. I think he said it best. You got to have grit, and we need you. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you. Again, we have been continuing our discussion this evening on Black men in medicine, on Medicine Makers, which is a show of the I Am Abel Foundation. Our guest this evening was Dr. Derek Robinson, Vice President and Chief Medical Officer, just love to say it, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois. Again, you can find out more information about the I Am Abel Foundation on our website, www.iamable.org. And for those of you that might be interested in learning a little bit more about Dr. Robinson, I heard you're on Twitter.
I am.
Yes, okay. So he has allowed me to share with the audience that you can find him on Twitter at Dr., and that's DR, and then Derek Robinson, DerekRobinson. All right, we'll tune in next week for the next edition of Medicine Makers. I am your host, Dr. Rene Roberts. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and have a fantastic evening.